I'm done with you, Michael, and I sold our beach house to start fresh with my trainer, Laura taunted through the phone, her laugh biting. I forced calm, replying, I see. My name is Michael Reynolds, 55, and I'd spent 25 years as a commercial property negotiator based out of Charleston, South Carolina. I specialized in finding overlooked value in contracts others had rushed to sign. My career thrived on patience, precision, and an eye for details that others missed. Unfortunately, I hadn't applied the same scrutiny to my marriage until it was almost too late. You're too focused on deals, Michael, Laura had once snapped, her words now echoing with bitter truth. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in Amsterdam finalizing a warehouse acquisition for an American logistics firm. 5 days into my trip, 7,000 miles from home, and Laura decided this was the perfect time to end our 17-year marriage. Evan and I need a fresh start, she continued, her voice laced with a confidence I recognized from countless divorce stories I'd heard from colleagues. We're done waiting for you, she taunted, her tone sharp with defiance. The beach house sold for a nice price. I've already signed the papers. Evan Parker, her personal trainer for the past 24 months, a 32-year-old who drove a car he couldn't afford and asked me once, without any shame, how much my watch cost. I didn't slam the hotel desk, didn't raise my voice, just calmly asked, when did you close the sale? Yesterday, she said, sounding almost disappointed by my composure. You're not even fighting for us, she mocked, her laugh cutting deeper than her words. Buyers moving in next week. I figured you wouldn't mind staying at the Hilton when you get back since you're always on the road. Anyway, after we hung up, I sat at the hotel desk for nearly an hour, staring at the Amsterdam skyline. The city's lights blurred, mirroring the storm raging inside me. Then, I pulled out my laptop, opened my email, and wrote to two people, Susan Mitchell, my title agent for the past 12 years, and David Langley, my attorney, since before I'd even met Laura. The subject line read, Urgent, fraudulent property sale attempt. She'll regret underestimating me, I whispered, my resolve hardening with each keystroke. Outside my window, rain began to fall on the Dutch streets. I watched business people hurry for cover, opening umbrellas, rushing into cafes. 17 years together, and Laura didn't know me at all. She thought I was predictable, passive, that I'd roll over and accept whatever she decided. You're too soft, Michael, she'd once sneered, her words now a haunting misjudgment. But there was one critical detail she'd overlooked. You don't spend decades in property negotiation without learning how to protect your assets. And you don't leave your livelihood to chance, especially when your instincts have been quietly warning you for months that something wasn't right at home. I met Laura Thompson 18 years ago at a real estate conference in Savannah. She was working for a luxury property management company, all sharp suits and sharper ambition. You're different, Michael, she'd said then, her smile disarming my defenses. I was impressed by her confidence, her quick mind. Within a year, we were married at the courthouse with just her brother and my sister as witnesses. We bought the beach house in Folly Beach 4 years later. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a wraparound deck with unobstructed ocean views. It cost $1,500,000, 0 cents, almost my entire savings, plus a sizable mortgage. I'd spend weekends repairing the weathered siding, upgrading the kitchen, and replacing the rotted deck boards, while Laura decorated and hosted friends. This is our forever place, she'd said, raising her wine glass on our first night there. We'll grow old here, she'd promised, her eyes bright with a future I believed in. I'd believed her. For a decade, we made it work. She quit property management to start her own interior design business, which gave her the flexibility to join me on international trips when the opportunity arose. I'd extended my business days to include weekend getaways in Rome, Lisbon, Singapore. You make life exciting, she'd whispered in Lisbon, a memory now tainted by doubt. We'd been good together, or so I thought. The first crack appeared about 3 years ago. Small things. She stopped asking about my work, started declining invitations to join me abroad. I need my own space, she'd snapped once. Her tone colder than I'd ever heard. Her texts grew shorter, more perfunctory, good luck with the deal, safe flight. No more, I miss you, or can't wait until you're home. Then came the gym membership. 6 days a week, she'd train with Evan, a former college athlete turned personal trainer. At first, I was supportive, encouraged her newfound focus on fitness. You're finally taking care of yourself, I'd said, unaware of the storm brewing. But then came the unexplained expenses on our credit card. Dinners I wasn't part of, weekend wellness retreats with friends I'd never met. Who are these people, Laura? I'd asked once, her dismissive shrug cutting deep. I didn't confront her, didn't place tracking apps on her phone, or hire investigators like some of my divorced colleagues had done. I simply observed, made mental notes, and quietly began preparing for what increasingly felt inevitable. 14 months ago, I transferred the beach house into a living trust. The paperwork was buried among refinancing documents for our investment property in Myrtle Beach. Laura had signed everything without reading, too busy texting on her phone while my attorney waited patiently. This protects us both, I told her. Just sign it, Michael, I trust you, she'd replied, her distraction now my shield. It wasn't entirely a lie. The structure would indeed protect the property, just not in the way she assumed. I never mentioned it again, just watched as she grew more distant, more attached to her phone, more dismissive of our shared future. You're always gone, she'd snapped last month, her accusation masking her own secrets. After emailing my attorney from Amsterdam, I closed my laptop and pulled the property deed from my briefcase. I always traveled with it, a habit from early in my career when a client tried to back out of a deal, claiming paperwork discrepancies. The deed clearly showed the Folly Beach property was held in the Michael Reynolds Living Trust, with me as the sole trustee. Laura had absolutely no legal right to sell it. The irony wasn't lost on me. In our early years, she'd tease me about my paperwork obsession and tendency to read every contract word for word. Life's too short for fine print, Michael, she'd say with a laugh. Your obsession saved us, my attorney had once joked, words now ringing true. But fine print had been the foundation of my career, and now, apparently, the salvation of my home. I called David while walking through Dam Square, Amsterdam's historic Central Square. Laura's crossed a line, Michael, he said, his voice sharp with urgency. She can't sell what she doesn't own, he confirmed after I explained the situation. Any sale she initiated is fraudulent. The buyers have no legal claim, and Laura attempting to sell property she doesn't own? That's fraud. Criminal charges are possible, though I assume that's not your preferred outcome. It wasn't. Despite everything, I didn't want Laura in legal jeopardy, but I also couldn't let her take the house. I've contacted the county recorder's office, David continued. We'll lock this down tight, he assured, his tone resolute. They flagged any attempted transfers on the property. I'll also notify any local title companies. This sale won't go through, Michael. After we hung up, I didn't immediately return to my hotel. Instead, I found a small cafe and ordered a coffee. The aroma of espresso did little to soothe the storm raging inside me. I sat there for nearly 2 hours watching tourists and locals pass by, trying to understand how 17 years of marriage had dissolved into this moment. What struck me wasn't anger. It was clarity. The betrayal wasn't just about another man or selling our home without my knowledge. It was the casual cruelty of it, the laughter in her voice when she delivered the news, as if my pain was an amusing afterthought, as if our life together had meant nothing. She underestimated you, I muttered, the words fueling my resolve. I sent a brief text to the Amsterdam client, explaining a family emergency required me to return home immediately. Then I booked the first available flight to South Carolina. On the 10-hour flight, I didn't watch movies or read reports. I just sat quietly, my mind racing with strategies to reclaim what was mine. A strange calm settled over me. For years, I'd navigated complex property negotiations for others, always finding the pressure points that would give my clients leverage. Now, I would use those same skills for myself. This is my deal now, I thought, a steely determination taking root. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, balance, setting things right. By the time the plane touched down in Charleston, my course was set. I wouldn't yell or plead or try to salvage what was clearly broken beyond repair. She'll face the consequences of her betrayal, I vowed, my resolve unyielding. I would simply enforce the contract she'd signed but never bothered to read. In property matters, signatures always matter more than intentions. That was a lesson Laura was about to learn. I didn't tell Laura I was coming home early. I rented a car at the airport and drove the 30 minutes to Folly Beach in silence. The quiet road mirrored the storm brewing within me. It was just afternoon on Friday when I pulled into our driveway. A silver BMW convertible I didn't recognize was parked in my usual spot. Evan, I presumed. The front door was unlocked. I could hear laughter from the kitchen, Laura and a male voice discussing what sounded like renovation plans. The wall between the living room and dining room should come down first, the man was saying. Open concept is everything in beach properties. I set my suitcase down quietly and walked toward the voices. Laura was leaning against the kitchen island, wearing a sundress I'd never seen, a glass of champagne in her hand. Evan stood behind her, his arm casually draped around her waist, pointing at something on a tablet. They both looked up as I entered. Laura's smile faltered for just a moment before recovering. "Michael," she said, surprise poorly concealed. "You're not supposed to be here," she hissed, her eyes narrowing with defiance. "I didn't expect you back until Sunday." "Clearly," I replied, glancing at Evan, who at least had the decency to remove his arm from my wife's waist. "This is awkward," Evan said with a nervous laugh. "Didn't think you'd show up unannounced," he added, his bravado faltering under my gaze. "I should probably go." "Actually," I countered, "I'd prefer if you stayed. This concerns you too, apparently." Laura's expression hardened. "Don't play games, Michael," she snapped, her voice sharp with venom. "We don't need to make this difficult, Michael. I've been unhappy for a long time. We both deserve a fresh start." I nodded calmly. "I agree completely, which is why I've already spoken to my attorney about the fraudulent property sale you attempted. You'll regret crossing me," I added, my tone icy, locking eyes with her. The color drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" Her voice trembled, betraying the panic she tried to hide. I placed my briefcase on the counter and retrieved the trust documents and property deed. "The beach house isn't yours to sell, Laura. It hasn't been for almost a year." Evan looked confused. "You said the sale was final," he said to Laura. "You swore it was ours," he snapped, his eyes wide with betrayal. "It was," she insisted, but I could see the uncertainty creeping into her expression. "Check the deed," I suggested. "The property is owned by the Michael Reynolds Living Trust. You signed the transfer papers last June. Remember those refinancing documents you didn't bother to read?" She snatched the papers from my hand, scanning them frantically. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "You set me up," she hissed, her hands shaking with rage. "Not only is it possible, it's legally binding," I continued. "The sale you initiated is null and void. The buyer has already been notified." Evan's confidence visibly deflated. "I'll wait in the car," he muttered, his voice barely audible as he fled the mounting tension. Once we were alone, Laura's shock transformed into rage. "You tricked me," she accused. "No," I corrected her. "I protected my assets, which is standard practice in my profession. You chose not to read what you were signing. That's not trickery. It's negligence." She tried a different approach, her voice softening. "Don't do this, Michael," she pleaded, her eyes glinting with false tears. "Michael, be reasonable. We can split the proceeds. There's no need for lawyers." "Except there are already lawyers involved," I replied. "Not just mine. The buyers are understandably upset about purchasing a property from someone who doesn't own it. They're considering their own legal options." "You wouldn't," she whispered. "You're cruel," she spat, her facade crumbling under pressure. "I'm not doing anything," I clarified. "I'm simply enforcing the legal ownership of the property. What happens next depends entirely on how you choose to proceed." Laura's face hardened again. She grabbed her phone from the counter. "I'll fight you to the end," she vowed, her voice venomous. "I'm calling my brother's lawyer. You won't get away with this." I didn't argue, just nodded and said, "You should definitely consult an attorney. I'll be staying at the Marriott downtown tonight to give you space, but to be clear, this house is not being sold, and I'll be moving back in on Monday." As I turned to leave, she called after me. "This isn't over, Michael. You'll regret this," she shouted, her voice echoing through the house. I glanced back at her, standing in the kitchen we'd renovated together, champagne still in hand. Actually, Laura, I think it is. Monday morning, I met with David at his office. The space was quiet, empty of the usual paralegals and assistants who filled it during weekdays. David looked tired but determined as he spread several documents across his desk. Laura's been playing a dangerous game, he warned, his voice heavy with grim resolve. There's more, he said without preamble. I had my investigator do some digging after your call. He pushed a folder toward me. Inside were bank statements, credit card receipts, and property records I'd never seen before. Laura's been busy, David continued. She opened a separate account last year, transferred about $210,000, 0 cents from your joint savings. The amount hit me like a physical blow. She gutted our future, I muttered, the betrayal searing through me. That was the majority of our liquid emergency fund. There's also this, he added, sliding another document forward. Preliminary paperwork for a retail space in Wilmington, leases in both her name and Evan Parker's. They're opening a fitness boutique, signed 4 months ago. I stared at the pages, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't an impulsive affair. This was calculated, planned. They've been plotting behind my back, I said, my voice tight with suppressed rage. They'd been working toward this for months, maybe longer. The timing makes sense now, I said, more to myself than David. She wasn't just selling the house for a divorce settlement. She needed capital for this business. David nodded. And there's one more thing. The buyer for your beach house? It's a shell company. Guess who owns it? Evan? His cousin, Ryan Parker. They were trying to get the house at below market value through a fraudulent sale, then likely flip it for profit after you discovered the sale and were forced to negotiate. It's a con, David said, his eyes narrowing with disgust. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just Laura leaving me for another man. This was a deliberate financial scheme to extract maximum value before discarding our marriage. I felt something shift inside me. She'll pay for this, I vowed, my calm facade giving way to steely determination. The calm acceptance I'd maintained since her phone call transformed into something colder, more focused. This wasn't just about protecting what was mine anymore. This was about accountability. What are my options? I asked. David leaned back in his chair. Laura's dug her own grave, he said, his voice edged with disdain. Legally, you're in a strong position. The trust protects the house. We can freeze the joint accounts to prevent further transfers. As for the money she's already taken, he paused. That's trickier. South Carolina's an equitable distribution state. She could argue it was her share of marital assets, the fraudulent sale attempt. That's where we have leverage. It's criminal fraud, potentially grand theft, depending on how a prosecutor views it. But I'm guessing you don't want to see your wife in jail. Not yet, I replied, my tone cold, masking the storm within. He was right. Despite everything, I didn't want that, but I also wouldn't be played for a fool. Here's what I propose, David continued, pulling out another document. A divorce settlement that's fair but firm. She returns 60% of the transferred funds, waives any claim to the beach house. You waive any claim to her new business venture. Clean break. No criminal charges. I studied the draft agreement, weighing my options. She won't back down easily, I warned, picturing her defiant glare. And if she refuses? David's expression was grim. We'll bury her in court, he vowed, his eyes narrowing with resolve. Then we pursue all available legal remedies, including potential criminal charges for the fraudulent property sale. But let's try this civilized approach first. As I left David's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Laura. My lawyer says you're bluffing. The house is joint property regardless of your trust trick. See you in court. You're delusional, I muttered, her arrogance fueling my determination. I showed the message to David, who shook his head. She's getting bad advice. The trust documentation is solid. Send the settlement offer, I decided, and prepare for court. I don't think she'll take the reasonable path. I spent the rest of Monday in my hotel room, reviewing financial records and property documents. Each page was a stab of betrayal, her deceit laid bare in black and white. With each page, each discovery of Laura's deception, my resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about standing my ground against someone who thought they could simply take what I'd spent decades building. Tuesday morning, I checked out of the hotel and drove to the county courthouse. The weight of her actions pressed against me, but I stood taller. David had filed the divorce petition first thing, along with an emergency motion to prevent any property transfers pending resolution of our case. By 11 a.m., it was official. Laura couldn't legally sell the house, even if it hadn't already been protected by the trust. Next, I visited Low Country Bank and spoke with the branch manager, Richard Hayes, an old client from my early days in property negotiation. "Laura's been reckless," Richard whispered, his voice low with concern. Within an hour, I'd separated my accounts from Laura's and secured my remaining assets. "Anything else I can help with, Michael?" Richard asked as we finished the paperwork. "You're cutting her off, aren't you?" he added, his eyes sharp with understanding. "Just one thing," I replied. "Can you tell me when the next automatic payment to Coastal Fitness is scheduled?" He checked the system. "There's a recurring payment of $400.00 set for tomorrow. It's been charging monthly for about 2 years." I nodded. "Please cancel that and any other automatic payments except utilities for the beach house." By 1 p.m., I'd updated my credit cards, notified my company's HR department about changes to my benefits, and spoken with our insurance agent. Each call felt like severing another tie to her betrayal. Methodically, I was untangling 17 years of financial entanglement. My phone buzzed repeatedly throughout the morning. Laura, then her brother, then a number I didn't recognize that I assumed was her lawyer. She's panicking now, I thought, ignoring their desperate attempts. I let them all go to voicemail. Around 3 p.m., I drove to the beach house. Laura's car was gone, but the BMW still sat in the driveway. I used my key to enter, half expecting the locks to be changed, but they weren't. Evan was in the living room, hurriedly packing a duffel bag. He froze when he saw me. "I was just grabbing my things," he said quickly. "Didn't expect you to show up," he stammered, his bravado crumbling. I didn't respond, just stood in the doorway watching him. "Look, man," he continued, growing visibly uncomfortable. "This wasn't personal. Laura said the marriage was over long before I came along." "Where is she?" I asked. "At her brother's. She's pretty upset. Said you were trying to ruin her." "She's the one who's ruined everything," I shot back, my voice low with restrained fury. I almost laughed at the irony. "Is that what she told you? That I'm the villain in this story?" He shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "You don't scare me," he muttered, but his trembling hands betrayed him. "She said you were controlling, that you trapped her in this town while you traveled the world. And the business you two were planning to open with money from selling my house, was that my fault too?" His eyes widened slightly, a confirmation that David's information was correct. "That's what I thought," I said. "You can tell Laura that her settlement offer is at David Langley's office. She has 48 hours to accept before we proceed to a contested divorce and potential fraud charges." "Fraud?" The fear in his voice was unmistakable. "What are you talking about?" "Attempting to sell property she doesn't own, opening businesses with misappropriated funds. Take your pick." "You're in over your head, Evan," I warned, my tone icy and unyielding. Evan grabbed his bag and moved toward the door. I stepped aside to let him pass. "One more thing," I called after him. "The buyer, Ryan Parker, your cousin, right? Tell him if he wants to avoid being named as a co-conspirator in the fraud investigation, he should formally withdraw his offer on this property by close of business today." "You'll destroy us all," Evan shouted, his voice cracking as he fled. The look on Evan's face confirmed everything. Within an hour, my phone rang. David with news that Ryan Parker had contacted the real estate agent to rescind his offer on the beach house. "They're scrambling now," David said, his voice tinged with grim satisfaction. By evening, I'd changed the locks, deactivated the old security system, and installed a new one with cameras. Each click of the new locks felt like reclaiming my life. I ordered delivery from the seafood restaurant Laura and I had frequented in happier times, and ate on the deck overlooking the ocean. The waves rolled in steadily, unchanging despite the chaos of human lives. Tomorrow would bring more legal maneuvers, more angry calls, more untangling of the life we'd built. But tonight, sitting in the house that remained mine, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not joy. The end of a marriage could never bring that. But the solid certainty that comes from standing your ground when someone tries to take what's yours. 4 weeks later, I sat across from Laura in David's conference room. Her attorney, a young man with an expensive suit and nervous eyes, shuffled papers while attempting to project confidence. Laura hadn't spoken directly to me since that day in the kitchen. She'd communicated only through increasingly desperate legal threats that David had systematically dismantled. "She's out of moves," David whispered to me, his eyes sharp with confidence. Today was meant to be a pretrial hearing, but we all knew it wouldn't get that far. The evidence was too overwhelming. "Before we begin," David said calmly, "I'd like to submit these into evidence." He slid 3 documents across the table: the trust deed, bank records showing Laura's systematic withdrawal of funds, and a signed affidavit from Ryan Parker admitting to the fraudulent property purchase scheme. Laura's lawyer quickly scanned the affidavit, his expression falling. He leaned over to whisper something in her ear. Her face remained rigid, but I could see the defeat in her eyes. "We're prepared to settle," her lawyer announced after their hushed conversation. David nodded. "Our terms are simple. Laura returns $125,000, 0 cents of the misappropriated funds. She relinquishes all claims to the beach house and other properties held in the trust. Michael waives any right to her new business venture and agrees not to pursue criminal charges." "And if I refuse?" Laura asked, the first words she'd spoken all morning. "You'll lose everything," David replied, his tone unyielding, cutting through her defiance. "Then we present this evidence to the district attorney," David replied matter-of-factly. "Fraud over $100,000, 0 cents. Carries serious penalties in South Carolina." Her lawyer placed a restraining hand on her arm. "We need to discuss this privately." They left the room for 20 minutes. The silence was heavy, Laura's defeat hanging in the air like a storm about to break. When they returned, Laura wouldn't meet my eyes. "We accept the terms," her lawyer stated. I didn't speak, didn't gloat, just signed where David indicated and watched as Laura did the same, her signature as familiar to me as my own after 17 years of shared tax returns, Christmas cards, and anniversary notes. And it was over. 8 months later, I stood on the deck of the beach house, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over the Atlantic. The property looked different now. I'd renovated the kitchen, replaced the weather-beaten siding with something more durable, and installed hurricane windows throughout. Each change erased her shadow, reclaiming the space as mine alone. The changes weren't just practical, they were symbolic, wiping away the old to make room for something new. I'd heard through mutual friends that Laura and Evan had opened their fitness studio in Wilmington, though on a smaller scale than originally planned. The business was struggling, apparently. I felt no satisfaction in that news. She made her choice, I thought, the pang of loss tempered by resolve. No joy in her difficulties, just a vague sadness for what might have been if different choices had been made. The divorce had finalized 4 months ago, clean, final. The settlement terms executed without further drama. Laura had returned the agreed-upon funds, which I'd promptly invested in a commercial property in downtown Charleston, a small retail complex with steady tenants and reliable income. My phone rang. Susan Mitchell, my title agent. "Just checking in," she said when I answered. "You've turned the house into a fortress," she teased, her voice warm with admiration. "How's the beach house?" "Getting better every day," I replied, watching a pair of pelicans glide over the waves. "Thanks again for your help with the trust setup." "That's what friends are for," she said. "Actually, I'm calling because I found another investment property that might interest you. Similar structure to what we did with the beach house, but commercial, good protection, steady income." "Send me the details," I said. "I'm interested." After we hung up, I continued watching the ocean. The horizon stretched endlessly, a reminder of possibilities beyond her betrayal. The waves rolled in, steady and predictable in their rhythm. There was comfort in that consistency, that natural order that couldn't be manipulated or stolen away. I finished my coffee and headed inside to get ready for work. The house was just a house, wood and glass and concrete. but it was mine. And sometimes, that's enough. This is my victory, I whispered, stepping into a future I'd reclaimed.